I played the worst rated games on Steam. Today I will tell you my story of suffering and unexpected discoveries. And I'll also try to find out, are these games really as bad as people write about them? Which of them are truly the worst and which ones actually surprised me in a good way? At the end of the video we'll sum it up and choose the best and worst games from the list. My story began with a game called Zula Global. The developers promise an intense free-to-play FPS in which you can play cooperatively with your teammates to overthrow the enemy side. When I launched the game and entered my first match, I saw a pretty dynamic gameplay that reminded me of a mix between Counter-Strike and Call of Duty. It was a deathmatch, and from a small list I could pick a gun to destroy my enemies. However, what confused me right away was that as soon as I entered my first fight, I started completely destroying the entire map. The reaction speed of the enemies was way too slow, and I kept scoring double and triple kills. Of course, I have a lot of experience in shooters and pretty decent aim, but at that moment I even had a thought slip through my mind: maybe these aren't real players at all, but bots. At some point I picked up an assault rifle from the ground and discovered that this game has weapon customization. The rifle had a proper scope, a silencer, and seemed to have less recoil. Great, I thought. This game will let me upgrade my guns and unlock new models with experience. I had never been so wrong. After the first match, when I was thrown back into the lobby, I immediately disliked what I saw. The interface looked like the worst kind of free-to-play pay-to-win garbage. Thousands of pop-up windows with donation offers, shops, battle passes, and skins. To upgrade a weapon you needed to collect materials, which I didn't have, and I still don't know where to get them. But judging by the huge number of donation boxes with materials, the game subtly hinted that I should open my wallet. And even if you had all the materials, you only had a certain chance to upgrade the gun, which means that even after buying a loot box, you could still fail. There was also some separate weapon upgrade window with different levels and branches, but I never figured out how it worked. As a newcomer, I just wanted to play, not study the details of this brilliant interface. But the most annoying thing in this game was that to get a new weapon, you had to open a loot box, and when it seemed like you finally got it, in fact you didn't get anything. You were given it as a rental for a limited time. To get anything at all, you had to open more decks, which were partially given for leveling up and completing missions, but mostly the game expected you to donate. And okay, in general, I'm not against donations in free-to-play games, but the core gameplay itself raised questions, and to clear my doubts, I went into a different match. And yes, I was right. For the next 40 minutes, I destroyed everything that moved, always staying at the top of the scoreboard in every match. Watching how other players played, I began to think that maybe this game has crossplay with mobile phones, and all these people are playing on their smartphone screens. My doubts grew even stronger when I met an enemy in close combat. While I was dodging left and right, trying to avoid his bullets and land mine, he couldn't even manage to turn his camera toward me and didn't fire a single shot. And just when I was about to close this game forever, I accidentally pressed some button. I still didn't know what it was, and suddenly a menu with new game modes opened in front of me. But now the game kindly informed me that only 12% of players were in deathmatch, while most of them were sitting in their own servers. There was also a battle royale mode which intrigued me, but to access it I needed to reach level 20. And here the game turned completely different. The players were much stronger, and on top of that they had upgraded guns with attachments. Now I no longer felt like a god. The map we played on was an exact copy of the DDoS 2 from Counter-Strike. Overall, this is not a bad low-budget Counter-Strike clone, if you don't mind the absolutely awful monetization and the fact that donators with upgraded guns will kill you 9 times out of 10, no matter what skill you have. I thought this was probably the worst game I'd have to play, but god, how wrong I was. Compared to the other games, Zula turned out to be a light walk in the park, a bright memory in the abyss of hell that was still waiting for me. The story of the next game will be quite short and unexpected. It's called Life is Feudal MMO. The developers promise us hardcore reality of the Middle Ages, master survival, and engage in deep-rooted RPG elements. Back then I had no idea what awaited for me. After pressing the play button, I was greeted by yet another annoying launcher, after which I was given a chance to create my own character. I was immediately shown that I was in some sort of beginner's location, where I could learn the basics of the gameplay. The first thing that caught my eye was the graphics. It was pretty simple. The color correction was grayish and very dark. Obviously the developers wanted to create the atmosphere of the Dark Middle Ages, but what actually came out is what you see on your screen. But the most surprising thing was that with such visuals, my far from weak graphics card was giving me only 60 FPS. Maybe other aspects of the game would surprise me, and spoiler, they really did. I ran to the village which was half empty. There were a couple of uninteresting NPCs and not a single real player. After talking to the local chief, I was given a task to register myself in this house. As far as I understood, this was how you set your spawn point, so if I died, I could respawn here. And what happened next became the first point of no return. I had to go to the campfire and press some button. For a long time I couldn't figure out what exactly I needed to press, and eventually I found the button called rest. As expected, the character sat down to rest. For several minutes I tried to get him back up. I pressed all available buttons on the keyboard and mouse, but nothing worked. Finally, after pressing rest again, my character finally stood up. Yeah, the interface here was really infuriating, but maybe the local quest could at least entertain me a little. Approaching the local priest, I was given the most exciting task in gaming history: to clean the coop and collect some eggs. A legendary and exciting journey begins with small steps, I thought. I completed the task, and then something terrible happened. I looked at the corner of the screen, and there was a whole stack of tasks from local NPCs, each one wanting to give me similar exciting quests. By this point, the game had already driven me into such boredom that I couldn't wait to turn it off and never launch it again. Even though I spent only about 20 minutes in it, absolutely everything about it annoyed me. There was no interesting story. I didn't see any progression. I couldn't loot anything. It didn't catch me with anything. Instead, it offered me to run around a depressing empty world, complete absolutely brain-dead tasks, and suffer from a stupid interface. I didn't want to waste another minute of my life in this game. The game is absolutely dead and empty. When I decided to check its online, everything became clear. The peak online for the day was only 16 people. With such numbers, this game can practically be considered dead. And those few who dare to enter this world leave it as quickly as well. For example, here's a review from a person with more than 500 hours in the game, saying it turned into a complete trash because of the developers' actions. I have no idea what exactly happened here, but you really have to try hard to kill the desire to play in someone who spent 500 hours on this game in a world where other games exist. Honestly, whilst there is a tutorial, it doesn't really help you in the real world. The UI is terrible, the movement is wonky, and for hundreds of miles there is no one. For $15 a month and years of development, especially being picked up by a studio, you would think they would listen to the community and improve their game. But this was only the beginning of my suffering, because for this video I selected the very worst games based on Steam reviews. And the next game on the list of the worst turned out to be Infestation: The New Beginning. It is a survival horror MMO that immerses players in a zombie-infested post-apocalyptic world, and judging by the reviews, we are in for an unforgettable adventure. The game immediately offered me to create my character and to go through the tutorial. What caught my attention right away was the graphics level. It looked horribly outdated. The character moved very strangely, and during a jump, he made weird noises. In general, some of the local animations raised a lot of questions. The entire environment was covered in noisy graphic artifacts. At first I thought maybe I just needed to enable anti-aliasing in some settings. Imagine my surprise when I found out that these were what the developers considered an anti-aliased image. When I disabled it for an experiment, I saw absolutely no difference, meaning it simply didn't work. But maybe the gameplay would be on such a level that I'd forget about this pathetic picture. I continued the tutorial, killed a couple of zombies, shot from different weapons, enjoyed the worst vehicle controls in video game history, and with a clear conscience went to find my first real match. The game had many different modes available, but since I assumed the online population was already small, I clicked quick play, and surprisingly in just a couple of seconds I was thrown into a match, where right after my character a piece of grass loaded in. Looking at the map, it seemed to me that it wasn't very big and that I could loot everything quickly. I had never been so wrong. Quite logically, I decided that the best loot would be in the biggest locations, like the city, but the problem was that running there on foot could take a while. The game, however, offered the possibility of fast travel right during the match, those red points, so I decided to get to the nearest one to teleport quickly into the city. But the main problem was that this map had been created by the devil himself. It was very deceptive, and to reach my destination I had to run a lot on my own legs. On the way I met my first zombies. Since I had only 15 bullets, I decided not to waste them and used my flashlight instead. But the local fauna quickly made it clear this wasn't the best idea. After using fast travel, I realized I was still far from the city, so I continued running. By that time, night fell, and I had to turn on my flashlight, and I wish I hadn't. Somehow, with the flashlight on at night, I could actually see less than without it. Using it created some strange halo around my character's head, making it useless, especially in first person. Finally, I got close to the city. My main goal was to find as much valuable loot as possible and maybe kill other players like me, but I had no idea what awaited me there. The city was filled with zombies and were triggered from a huge distance, so sneaking past them was impossible. Since I had very few bullets, I desperately needed a new weapon and ammo. I managed to get some, took a position on high ground and shot anyone who came close. I was worried that the sound of my shots would attract other players, but I had no choice. At this point I was armed and ready to grab my rightful loot, but once again the game pulled me down to the ground. Turning a corner, I triggered a local super zombie. To kill such a beast, you need to unload a whole machine gun magazine into it, but the main problem was that I had no ammo. I started running as fast as I could, tried to save myself by climbing onto a table, but the zombie still reached me and took away half of my HP with just 2 hits. I kept running trying to escape. He caught up with me and hit me again. Now I was one shot and any hit would kill me. Hoping to confuse the monster, I ran toward the nearest building. Maybe I could hide there. My health was dropping from bleeding, my stamina was running out. I had literally just a few seconds left to leave. Well, that was my first raid and I can't say that I liked it. You know that feeling in difficult games when you die, but you know that if you were more skilled or did something differently, you could have survived. Yeah, this wasn't that case. This game is just stupid. I had no chance to survive and no skill would have helped me. But I still decided to give it one more chance and that was my second big mistake. I wanted to see other players, so I went into the PvP tab and found the only half-alive server. I was immediately loaded into match, but to my surprise I didn't have a single weapon. While I was thinking about where to find loot, a player ran out from around the corner and erased me from reality in 1 second. I respawned again, still without a weapon. I had to find loot quickly before someone killed me. It had to be somewhere here, right nearby. They couldn't have thrown me into a battle without a weapon, on a map without a loot, right? Only later I found out that when you load into match, you only have the weapons you pre-equipped on your character. And if you die in this PvP mode, you lose your weapon forever. Yes, you could find loot on other players' dead spots, but that was insanely difficult. Needless to say that I had absolutely no desire to play this anymore, because PvP mode in such games is supposed to be the fun break from looting and fear of losing your gear. It's time to sum up. Infestation: The New Beginning really managed to surprise me, because never in my life had I played such a bad game. The graphics are awful, the maps are huge and empty, the game is raw and unfinished, and considering the number of players online, this is literally a dead project, and I don't recommend anyone to try it. Every single second I spent in the game was filled with suffering, and now I understand why the reviews are like this. For example, several people write that the game is full of cheaters, but somehow the developers managed to ban those who don't use cheats, thereby killing the only 1% of real players. And you know what? I believe them. That person must either have a very hard life or incredible willpower if he managed to spend 155 hours in this game. Here's another negative review after 150 hours of play. This guy really tried to give the game a chance. Pulling myself together, I moved on to the next game called Vigor. This game by its genre is very similar to the previous one, but unlike it, it actually managed to pleasantly surprise me, especially considering that the online player count here is 10 times bigger and the maps are several times smaller, which gives you almost 100% chance of encountering an enemy player during a raid. The game offered me to go through training, and the first thing that caught my eye was the graphics. This game really looks beautiful, while also giving quite decent FPS. More than once I found myself stopping to take atmospheric screenshots. However, I couldn't help but notice a problem with anti-aliasing, since objects in the distance became very blurry, which made spotting enemy players much more difficult, and later I would run into this problem more than once. After finishing the training, it turned out that I now had my own personal shelter. Even though it was in a miserable state at the moment, it could be upgraded, giving me all sorts of bonuses for my raids. The resources for upgrades had to be gathered during raids, and to research something with them, a certain amount of real time had to pass. But I decided not to wait long and immediately jumped in to fill the real gameplay. And to my huge surprise, the match loaded with 7 other players. My goal was simple: kill at least one player and take his juicy loot. First thing I did was open the map and start thinking where to go. It was obvious to me that the fattest loot would be at the points of interest, so I decided to head toward the nearest one. Arriving at the nearest village, I surprisingly stumbled upon my first opponent. I hit him about 7 times and still couldn't kill him, after which I started chasing him. In my mind, I was already picturing the fat loot I would get from him in the very first minutes of the game. However, it was as if he just vanished. Choosing another spot on the map where I could definitely find better loot, I continued on my way and just a few minutes later met my second opponent. He was far away in a tunnel and it seemed like he didn't see me. I even managed to hit him once, but since back then I didn't know how to switch to first person aim, I couldn't shoot effectively at long range. At one point, one of the opponents, the one who apparently had the most kills, appeared on my map, and I decided this was my chance to finally kill someone. I had a huge advantage because I knew exactly where he was, and he didn't. I had played games like this before, and I knew the main advantage is having your position unknown. Staying unseen gives you the chance to the first shot, which usually means a 90% chance of winning the fight. I carefully kept moving closer to my target, and damn, it seemed like he noticed me. But I still had the advantage, I was higher up, and yeah, he killed me. The deciding factor was that aiming from third person at such a distance was practically impossible, but I wasn't upset because this was only my first raid, and the most important thing is, I actually liked it. After equipping myself with a new weapon and learning how to use the sights, I went into a battle determined to come out as the winner, and in this match I finally got what I was aiming for so badly. I carefully moved deeper into the city location. Earlier I had heard gunshots from that side. I knew there could be an opponent nearby, and then suddenly someone opened fire on me. Somehow I managed to run away without taking a single hit, even though the shots were totally unexpected. I tried to spot the enemy but failed. He had a huge advantage since he knew where I was, while I couldn't see him. I decided to change position and try to approach from an unexpected angle. I eventually spotted him lying on the roof of a building. He had chosen a very bad spot since he had no cover at all. I managed to kill him with a few aimed shots, and now the hardest spot was looting him without anyone seeing me, because that spot was literally exposed from every side. He had a huge amount of loot, and now all I could think about was how to carry it to the exit. But my situation got worse. As soon as I started running to the evacuation point, the radiation timer started ticking. That meant that very soon everyone who hadn't evacuated would start losing health very quickly. Luckily, I made it out with all the loot I gathered. I played several more matches, and in each one I managed to kill someone and take their loot. I was really enjoying it. For example, here I spotted an opponent, but the only weapon I had was a sniper rifle, and I knew I couldn't handle him in close combat. My session ended during another raid where I knew exactly where the enemy was since I had revealed him on the map earlier. But the problem was that I couldn't just see him. I suggest you try it yourself. Okay, let's try again. Here's the original screenshot. Do you see the opponent? Let's zoom it in. Still don't see him, right? Let's zoom it again. There he is. Even after multiple zoom-ins, in a freeze frame, it's really hard to spot the enemy. He just blends into the environment. I got killed and it really pissed me off that I couldn't see the opponent, not because of my mistake or lack of attention, but purely because of the blurry anti-aliasing that cannot be turned off in the game. From the positives, the game has beautiful graphics and an interesting idea with upgrading your base. Everybody loves upgrading a base. There's something cozy about it. The interface is clear and intuitive, unlike the previous game, and the shooting feels decent. From the negatives, no ability to wear armored or customized weapons. It takes a very long time to find a match in all modes. Only one map is actually playable. I couldn't find a match on others. Also, no way to turn off the anti-aliasing that blurs details at a distance. And I couldn't find a way to increase inventory capacity, which fills up very quickly. Overall, I can't recommend this game. You can really get some enjoyment out of it. The next game turned out to be a complete surprise for me, because it had some of the worst reviews on Steam, yet at the same time it is one of the best games on this list, and its name is Overwatch 2. Many people know the story of Overwatch. After the release of the second part, the game switched to a free-to-play format. Players were promised a lot of things, and almost none of those promises were fulfilled. That was a long time ago, and since then I haven't played Overwatch or followed what was was happening with it. So it was really interesting for me to return after many years and to see in what state the game is in now. In fact, the developers came up with the switch to free-to-play only because the old monetization model wasn't making enough money. Back then, players could buy the game once and then receive any in-game items like skins for free. Now they had the opportunity to sell players battle passes, loot boxes and skins, and since then the game started to get massively hated because it became a sort of a symbol of how corporate greed can ruin even the most interesting and successful projects. So after playing for a few days, I came to some surprising conclusions. First of all, the game has a huge online player base, much larger than 3 years ago. Just on Steam, at the time of recording, there were almost 40,000 players, and in total I think there are over 100,000 because since most play through the Epic Games launcher, but you especially feel that online is big when you look at the matchmaking speed. The game is still as good as it was many years ago. There are many new characters, it has a lot of new content, and if you are a new player who has never played Overwatch, here you can find activities for hundreds of hours. I especially like the stadium mode, where you don't just fight against other players, but also level up your character, and every round you can buy yourself new abilities. You can actually create your own builds here. Every choice you make affects the gameplay as a whole. For example, you can upgrade Soldier into a tank and make his healing field so powerful that it will not only heal you at insane speed, but also buff your fire rate and deal damage to nearby enemies. Or you can turn him into a crazy damage dealer, endlessly increasing damage and attack speed. The main feature is that every time you launch rockets, you get a half-second aimbot, which allows you to easily finish off enemies with half HP. And that's only 2 options. I'm sure there are many more. One of the downsides is that in this mode most heroes are unavailable. And for example, my favorite Hanzo isn't there. But in conclusion, I want to say that Overwatch 2 at the moment is still very good. You won't get this kind of gameplay anywhere else, and I managed to get genuine enjoyment from the game. And I will probably stick around here for a few more evenings. I thought for a long time about which of these games is the worst, and I decided to put Life is Feudal MMO in last place. This game really made me suffer, and I physically couldn't force myself to play it for even half an hour longer. In 4th place is Infestation: The New Beginning. This game is bad, really bad. This huge empty world fills me with sadness at just the memory of it, and if I could, I would gladly erase this adventure from my mind. Zula Global takes the honorable 3rd place as a free Counter-Strike clone for those who have a calculator instead of a PC and a lot of money to donate. It can even bring a certain dose of fun. In 2nd place is Vigor, a truly interesting and bright adventure that can capture you for a few evenings. The ability to upgrade your base gets a special like from me, but after about 10 matches it can get boring very quickly. And in 1st place is the game with the worst reviews from Steam players. Overwatch 2 is not what it used to be, but it's still fun and interesting to play. This was my story about the worst games on Steam, and I hope that you enjoyed it.